Hello students, Jimmy here. I wanted to talk about CyberDuck and FTP and explain how one might take code that you've written in Codecademy, move it to a text editor, save it to your computer, and upload it to your own personal web page. So the first thing I wanted to mention is that when using my particular host, which is DreamHost, when you are given a URL to have a website, like mine here is jn0074.peakofwalpies.net. Notice that's my EU ID, like I've done with everyone else. The default that happens when I ask DreamHost to make me a website is it creates a file called index.html and it puts what you see here. The URL is almost here. Upload your website to get started, and a couple of links. The goal here is to prevent people who come to your website from seeing anything other than what you want them to see. So if you look up at the URL at the top, jn0074.peakofwalpies.net, there's nothing at the end of that URL. But if I put a slash there and type index.html, notice that what loads is the exact same page you see here. So by default, most web servers, and this can be configured, but most of them will find the file in the folder for your website called index.html, and that's the one they show by default. So that is your quote-unquote homepage. So you'll notice that's what you see when you go to your URL. You can't see a list of files. All you see is what is displayed inside the index.html file. Now that's important when you want to find the files you put on the web, and I'll show you why here in a moment. So I'm going to switch over to Codecademy. Here is the high quality HTML I've written from the last assignment in the HTML1 block. I'm going to highlight all this. Looks like I already had. And I'm going to switch over to Text Wrangler. If you're using a Windows computer, I recommend Notepad++. If you're using a Mac computer, I recommend Text Wrangler. There are actual high quality non-free text editors that I recommend if you're planning on doing HTML, CSS, or any programming, but these are certainly pretty darn good, and as you get into more difficult stuff, you may want to move to something you have to pay for. I use BBEdit, which is the big brother of Text Wrangler on the Mac. I've used it for a long time. It's got a whole lot of coding specific features, and it's just great. So I'm going to paste all of the HTML that I copied from my Codecademy account. I'm going to save this, and I've already got, I'm going to put this on my desktop, and I've already got a file there called Codecademy1.html, but what's in it doesn't matter. So I'm going to make sure that I know what I've saved it as, where I've saved it on my computer. Maybe I'll go ahead, now I'll leave it as Codecademy-1.html. I'll hit save. And it's asking, do I want to replace it? I do, because this is the updated one. So now I want to switch over to CyberDuck. So CyberDuck is a different FTP client than I've used in some of my other videos. FileZilla is a great client, but the way in which the software is distributed has led to some people getting pieces of software bundled with FileZilla that look and act a whole lot like malware or spyware or adware. And I just thought that wasn't a good way to do things when you're trying to learn how to do stuff on the web. Having to deal with software that you don't trust just seemed terrible. CyberDuck cost, I just looked at the Mac App Store, and I think it was $24 for the Mac. I don't know how much it is for Windows. You can certainly use it for free. Notice mine says unregistered. If you're going to use a Mac in FTP, I recommend Transmit by the company Panic. It's the best FTP client I've ever used. It's very, very powerful and very well integrated into the operating system. If you're going to use a Windows version of FTP, I actually don't know off the top of my head what great client there is that you should pay for. CyberDuck seems to be pretty good though. So if you don't know what else to do and you're interested in using FTP beyond this class and you're looking to pay for one, it looks like CyberDuck may be a good way to go. Okay. So here I am in the main little window, and I don't have anything set up. So I'm going to click over here under Open a Connection. And the very first thing I want you to notice is this pull-down menu here that says FTP. Change that to SFTP. I have set up all of the accounts to be the secure FTP protocol. The reason is the other FTP version doesn't necessarily protect your password, so I thought this was a good way to do it. Where it says server, in the email that I sent you, I gave you a username, a password, and a URL. Put the URL in there. So mine is jn0074.picovolpes.net. The username is the EUID, jn0074, and the password I've already... Alright, I had to go copy the password again. So there we go. You don't need to change any of the other features in here. Make sure this says FTP, the URL that I gave you, the server address, the username, which should be the same as the first part of that, which should be your EUID, and the password that I gave you. And I'm going to hit connect, and it logs in. Notice that unlike other programs that I have used, or maybe you have ever used for FTP, CyberDuck doesn't have all the files for the server on one side and all the files for the client on the other. What you see in front of you is just what's on the server. So you're going to need to have ready access to your files, maybe have a Finder window or an Explorer window if you're using Windows open so you can drag and drop the files. So in this SFTP window in CyberDuck, what we see here are the two folders that are on the server. Anything you want to actually show up on the web has to be put into the folder jn0074.picovolpes.net or your euid.picovolpes.net. If it's not in that folder, it's not actually on the web. So I'm going to come over here to my desktop and grab codecademy1.html, and I'm going to drag it over the folder jn0074.picovolpes.net. I'm going to let it go. And you'll notice a window comes up that says something about transfers, and it says that the upload is complete. So if I go back over here to this tab in Firefox, remember what I told you before, the euid.picovolpes.net, that going to that URL will not show you a list of all your files. You've got to know explicitly what the file is named and any folder you've put it in so that you can actually access it from a web browser. So if I add to the URL that's there, /codecademy1.html. Oh, spell it correctly. codecademy1.html and hit enter. Assuming that I typed the URL correctly and that file was put in that folder in CyberDuck, it's on the web. When you use FTP, it's the metaphor I like to use, I guess it's a metaphor, is a restaurant. When you come into the restaurant as a client, as a consumer, and you sit down and they bring you food, you are using the services the restaurant has to offer. If someone needs to deliver food, though, they don't generally bring, the delivery truck doesn't pull up to the front door and come in there. They come into some back door, load up the stuff into the kitchen, and go about their merry way. That is what it's like to use FTP. When you are the person that has to deliver the food to the restaurant, you're taking your files off your computer and putting them onto the web. The way we do that is with FTP. If you want people to actually use your files and access them and look at your website, then they'll just go to the URL that you tell them, and then they can see your website and interact with it and do what they want. But you, as the web developer, you have to actually put the food into the restaurant through the right way, which means you got to deliver the stuff in a truck to the back door, put it away where it's supposed to go, make sure it's all well organized and you know where everything is stored. That's what FTP is like. You, as the web designer, have to put the files on the web somehow, and the typical way we do that, well, one of the most common ways, is to use FTP to interact with the server. So the server is running two different kinds of software. Well, it's probably running lots and lots of different kinds of software, but we're talking about two specific programs here. There's the FTP server, which is running on the same computer as the HTTP server or web server. And when we put things using FTP into the right folder, bam, they're on the web. That's all there is to it. So now I could take this URL, copy it, paste it, put it in an email, put it on my All About Me page on picovolpes.net, and it's available for people to see. Notice if I come back here and delete codecademy1.html and hit enter, it doesn't have a list of my files. It doesn't say anything about codecademy-1.html being on that website at all. So you've got to know the file name, whether or not it was capitalized, whether or not you put it in any other folders besides the one that is the URL. If you make subfolders, you've got to put the subfolder in there as well. So /codecademy-1.html, bam, it works. The thing that I would mention about CyberDuck besides how to connect is once I disconnect and let it sit there for a minute, you'll be able to, of course, you can open the connection again, but when you come back into the piece of software, there will be a list of, hang on a second, y'all. Oh, there it is. Under History, you can select where you were before. Notice it opens it up again, and it's got your stuff saved. So that's kind of an introduction to CyberDuck and FTP and putting things on the web, and I hope that answers some of your questions.